Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome back to Citywide Blackout, your home for music, movies, and more. I'm your host, Max Bowen. An adventure in the gray outdoors leads to a sharing of pasts among three friends in Kristine Ochu's debut novel, Campfire Confessions, now available through BooksFluent. In this episode, Kristine and I talk about Annie, Jo, and Sandra, and what each brings to the story, and how they drive the plot. Kristine has a pretty diverse background as a log rolling champion, international human resource executive, motivational speaker, and longtime screenwriter, and we look at how all these experiences factored into the story. Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome back to the show. Thank you once again for joining me. It's so cool to have you here. Hope everything's good in your world. Where I am, it is around mid-March as we record this interview, and I live in Massachusetts, so we are entering what we like to call fake spring, or the spring of deception, because we'll have days where it's like, hey, it's cool, it's 47 degrees out, or 67 degrees out. The next day it's like, haha, gotcha, it's actually 20 degrees out, and then you get 2 feet of snow. Enjoy that, humans. So that's what I am putting up with. My guest, though, is not, because she lives in Florida, so it's nice and sunny, nice and warm, and for her, I think snow is just a very, very distant memory. So joining me now is Kristine Ochu. She is the author of Campfire Confessions, her debut novel, recently released. But before we get into that, we need to talk about something else, because not only is she a debut writer, a great book out you definitely want to check out, she's also a log roller. Now, folks, I don't know about you, but I always thought that was just I didn't know that was a real thing. I thought it was something that we just came up with, that folks in like the way out yonder did, but it's a real thing. And I'm talking to someone here. So, Kristine, thank you for joining me. It is so cool to have you here. I cannot wait to just dive right into everything.
Thanks, Cyrus. Max, I'm sorry. I tell you. Log rolling, growing up in the northwest of Wisconsin, instead of going to the beach, we would go to the log rolling docks. And I remember my dad would drop me off on the way to work, and I'd have my peanut butter sandwich and I think a mug of Kool-Aid. And then he'd pick me up after work, and we'd hang out with all our friends and just log roll and goof around on the logs, and just fell in love with the sport since I was like 9. And then competed probably into my young 20s.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're also a log rolling champion. So you're not just a log roller, you actually won like tournaments, competitions for this.
Yeah.
Where is this happening? I want to see it.
Well, Hayward, Wisconsin, where is my hometown, is home to the World Lumberjack Championships. And I think they celebrated, I'm not sure if it was their 100th year, not too long ago. But of course, it was one of the log rolling towns way back when. And, so it's part of the kind of that whole logging trail of history. And so people really, there was a lumber mill there, and there still is a lumber mill there. But people would get onto these logs and with their spikes on and their log rolling shoes, and they would get those logs and break up log jams to keep the logs flowing down the river. So they just kind of brought that sport into this lumberjack bowl, put up some huge poles, so we had that pole climbing and docks for chopping and sawing, and then the logs for rolling, and it's just a blast.
I now have a new life's goal: to see a log rolling competition before I die. This is on that list. There's a lot of other things there, but this is now on the list right at the top, because it sounds so cool.
You had come up to Hayward, Wisconsin. We actually I have my summer home there, or a family home that my grandfather built on the lake. And we've got a couple logs out on the lake. And so you come on out. We got an extra bedroom. Come on out.
I'm so down for that. And I actually want to actually try log rolling. I'm sure I'll probably smack my skull on the damn thing, but I'll give it a go.
I love it. It's fun to have a little adventure, right?
You got to have some adventure in life. You can't just do the same thing forever. And speaking of which, you actually writing is a very adventurous thing for you, because looking at your background, you are an international human resources executive, of course, log rolling champion. You're a motivational speaker, and now you're a writer. How did this come about? Like, how did what made you say, okay, one day I'm gonna write a book?
Well, the first book that I remember reading on the motivational side was The Power of Positive Thinking. Do you remember that one from Norman Vincent Peale? So I read that in 1975. That's when I won the World Senior Amateur Championship. And it got me hooked into psychology. So I went for my BA in psychology, then my master's in human resources, and then went on to this career for about 15 years, loved it. But I always wanted to write. I mean, since I was a little kid, we'd sit, and I had a best girlfriend, and we'd spend Saturday afternoons like writing poetry and stories and things like that. And when I had the chance to leave the corporate world early, I decided I want to write screenplays. So I actually joined Harvard Square Scriptwriters, which is based in Boston. I was living in Boston at the time, and Grub Street Writers as well. And I learned a heck of a lot. There's still Harvard Square Scriptwriters. I'm still part of that group. Awesome people, really supportive. So I learned a lot. I used to bring in my screenplays and get workshopped, and that's when you had to learn to kind of really develop a tough skin, because you might get 5 minutes of praise and another hour and 55 minutes of what you'd call constructive feedback, but felt brutal at times, right? So all these things kind of built into this journey of becoming an author. And then, like anybody in life, I had my ups and downs and my trials and tribulations. Um, and every messy experience that you have, I went through a divorce, and lost loved ones, took care of aging parents, and, developed with parents with cancer, and this, that, they all just kind of fed into this whole kind of passion to kind of turn a little bit away from screenplays and get into trying my hand at writing a novel. In the middle of that, between got into doing the screenplays, I wrote 6 for myself and 2 with my sister, Lorraine Lacey. But screenwriting is really tough to break into, and it's a different type of writing. And for the book Campfire Confessions, I wanted to get more into the character's head, wanted to share their thoughts and their feelings a little bit more and get into the senses. So I actually started the book in 2016. And so it was a 5-year journey, because during that time, I had grandkids happen, and I just learned a lot about, I call it my mantras: balance, focus, and faith. Just like log rolling, you got to keep your balance. And the focus is, if you take your eyes off the other person's feet that you're rolling against on the other side of the log, you take your eyes off, you look away, you're going to fall in the water. And 3 is kind of like the faith. So if you fall in, you get wet, you get out of the water, and you get back in the log and try it again. So it's like, just like life, can't give up, just keep at it. So
Exactly, exactly. Now, going back a bit to the screenplay writing, that is such a cool thing that you did that, and of course, Boston has such a vibrant film scene. Did anything you write ever get produced?
no, it didn't. I got lucky a few times. I had some options. I had those just moments where you think you broke through. I wrote a script called Lumberjill that I co-wrote with my sister, Lorraine Lacey, and we had an agent for that one. And we were so close, but it never quite happened. And then I had another almost, and then 9/11 happened, and that agency kind of shut down for a while. But I did win a live stage reading at the Nantucket Arts Festival, not the Nantucket Film Festival, the Nantucket Arts Festival. And so they did bring in actors and actresses from New York City. Alex Donis led it, directed it, and they did live stage play reading for me off of the script. So that was really that was a high, But yeah, and everything that you learn in screenwriting, I feel like made this book better. It depends on what kind of book you like, but I feel like a fast-paced book with a lot of action, because in screenwrite plays, excuse me, it's all about action and dialogue. You can't tell in a script what people are feeling or thinking. You got to show it, right? So I think in the book, I was able to bring a lot of that along and kind of the visual part of it. And so I think it makes for a nice, people like a fast read.
Oh,
I think it fits that.
yeah, definitely, definitely. What would you say was the biggest challenge to adjusting from writing screenplays where, like you said, you can't really bury the person in detail because you've got to show, not tell, to novel writing where you want to write a lot?
It was a challenge. When I first finished my first draft in 2017, I thought it was it. I thought it was hot. That was great. And I went to share with one of my writing friends that was a novelist. And 2 weeks later, she called me and said, "Oh, this is a mess." She says, "It's half novel, half screenplay." And I'm like, okay. So I listened to the feedback. So it was, a lot of it was not really setting up the scene enough, not using enough description, because in a screenplay, you're stories being told on a screen, right, on film, so they see the character and you don't have to draw it out. So, but in a book, you have to draw that picture of that character and what's happening with your words. So, it took me some time to really get into it and understand the point of view. I ended up getting a writing coach in 2019, which really was huge help. And that really kind of helped me turn the corner. And then suddenly she said, okay, you're on your own, go fly, leave the nest. So I would send her chapters at a time and get some feedback. But it took some dedication for sure to change.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I like to ask about feedback because as you mentioned, you know, the screenplay sessions were like 2 minutes of glowing praise, and in a couple hours of, well, here's what's wrong with it now. How do you know when you're not willing to budge on something?
Excellent question. It really is. I have to bitten my cheek, probably like inside to stop like from crying a few times, especially when I first started out. You know, surprised I wasn't like gushing blood at times. Um, but the biggest lessons I learned is that it's your story. And I had one script, and this is the one that had a lot of traction called Nantucket Ore. And it was the one that won the contest and had some options. And I workshopped it one time too many and took the feedback in too many times. And I changed the script way too much where suddenly it just lost its magic and it wasn't my story anymore. And so I learned a really valuable lesson as far as, stay true to your story. You're the only one with that voice. If you really, feel it in your heart and your gut, stick with it, and because not everyone's going to resonate with everything you write. And that's what you really start to learn. I mean, even in the book, on Amazon, I've gotten some 5 stars, I've gotten some 4 stars, and then I got 1 3 star. And of course, I gravitated to the 1 3 star. And I'm like, what? you know, but then I had to feel like, okay, she probably prefers a different style of writing and a different story. And that's cool, so not everything's going to be for everybody.
Exactly. And taste is so subjective. I think that that's probably the biggest lesson to tell anyone who wants to write a book or do screenplay writing or do poetry or what have you.
Yeah.
You're not going to make everyone happy. You're going to get those 3 stars, those 2 stars, the 1 stars, the no star reviews. It's going to
Yeah.
happen. And
Yeah.
just say, you know what? I didn't do anything wrong. They just didn't like it. And that's okay because you're not going to like everything. I mean, I don't like every book I read. I don't like every movie I watch. I don't like every
Right.
CD that I listen to. I do listen to those. I still do listen to them. But the point is that taste is very subjective. And if you go into it thinking, I'll make everyone happy, ain't going to happen.
Right.
Ain't gonna
Exactly.
happen. It's really rare
Right.
when a movie comes out and everyone loves it. I think like the Lego movie is the only one to not get a negative review. That's it.
That's funny. I didn't know that one. I'll have to watch it now.
Just about, yeah, just about. All right. So do you think you're better at it these days when it comes to taking the negative feedback than you were when you first started?
So I would say definitely, I'll always reflect. I feel like I can always learn. And sometimes learning to say, well, you know, maybe you're right, maybe you're not, but this is really how I feel about it. So I think it's maybe standing on your own 2 feet. And my writing coach said something about, when you sit down in the chair, she almost would say, like, say a prayer, just kind of meditate for a moment and really go within. So I think part of that is, who are you and how does your heart and gut react to that feedback and quiet yourself.
Would you say that's the best advice you got from your writing coach?
To me it was because I'm a pretty spiritual person, from the fact that I just I think spirituality has a lot of different meanings. To me, it's a lot about love and compassion and kindness and just feeling that energy and trying to get that energy to others. So when I would sit down, I would just like kind of wanting to give my characters the best that I could for them and try to give them each their own unique voice. That was another thing that I did learn too is with um, with any kind of writing is um, to give each character their own voice, their own habits, their own quirks, their own kind of like dialogue. So each of my characters, like one kind of juts her head out to the side. She's got this tough girl act. One tends to like to tap a lot, kind of using tapping to slow down her anxiety and, kind of fakes confidence by flinging back her hair. She's gorgeous, of course. And, the other one is kind of plays the martyr role a little bit and hides her feelings a little bit with her over positivity at times, so.
You mentioned that this was 5 years in the making. You began writing this in 2016. Did you find yourself having to sort of like relearn your own story before you could like finish it off?
Um, you know, I had the outline, and I would have to say that every year something big happened in my life, or more than one thing. And there's a line in the story like, sometimes life's a mess, but the most treasured stories are in the mess. And it's almost like if you ever taken a really bad vacation and, let's say it's got a flat tire, maybe got crying kids in the car. Well, later on, that's kind of the story everybody remembers and they laugh about it. And that's the fun that they share around like, Thanksgiving dinner. But I'm trying to think, I lost track there. Where was I going with that? I had a really good answer. And I kind of lost
You're the
it.
writer. You tell me.
I know. I'm thinking, the 5 years, yeah. And, there was inspiration along the way. I mean, I ended up kayaking in 2016. I tore my ACL in half. Our dog ran behind my knee, took it, the bone went out, popped back in, tore the ACL. So I ended up wearing this huge knee brace over the summer, right? But I just couldn't sit around. And I always felt like, you know, God puts me in the chair when he really wants me to get something done. And so there I was. But I had enough sitting around. So I said to my brother, let's go kayaking. So I went kayaking in the Namakagon River outside Hayward, Wisconsin, where a lot of the story takes place. And I wanted to go, there's a little island in the middle of the river. And I said, well, I'm going to go to the right. The water's faster, looks more fun. And well, my kayak got jammed up against this huge branch that had fallen into the river. And I thought, oh, no big deal. I'll just push off. Well, I couldn't push off. The current was stronger than I thought. And so as I was pushing, the kayak tipped enough that the water started rushing into the kayak. And before I knew it, I had flipped. So I had kind of what you'd call between a rock and a hard spot, right? But it was between the tree branch and the bottom of the river. And I tried to get out of the kayak, but my brace caught on the lip of the kayak. And I thought, oh my gosh, okay, I've got my two daughters, my husband, my family, I've got little grandkids, babies, grandbabies, and I'm going to die. And just everything got super, super still. And I just don't know what, but I just ended up putting my arms out, kind of outstretched my arms, and somehow the current took me out. I felt myself floating after a few minutes. Good thing I was a good swimmer because I could hold my breath for a while. And then I resurfaced maybe 20 yards down, and the kayak banged me behind the knees. And I thought, oh my gosh. And my brother, of course, was horrified, and he came paddling up. And we thought it was really great, and we're laughing and sharing. But when I went back and shared it with my mother, she wasn't, she wasn't very happy. She was really scared. Um, but that like experience went into the book. Also, during that 5 years, I created my workshop called Creating Your Amazing Life. And I taught because I had a psychology background and I'm a lifelong student of meditation, neuroscience, quantum physics, whatever, and get my hand on when it comes to human potentiality. And I was up in this town in Hayward, Wisconsin, and no, it's not a lot of financial richness there. I'd say it's a tough economy. And I wanted to give back to the community. So I created this workshop for women who may not have a chance to go to a workshop in the cities or the money, to share these powerful tools of motivation and empowerment and energy things like tapping and meditation and visualization. And as I taught it to them, I thought, I'm going to give this to the characters. So that was kind of like in 2018. And at that same time, I ended up self-publishing a children's book for my two granddaughters I was babysitting. I made up this story about this called No Pooping on the Dock, is what the owl and the Looney, Wacky, Naughty, Crazy Ducks. So they were having a meltdown, and we had this owl on our dock on the lake in Wisconsin. And so I made up the story that, the owl was a nice owl, was going to share his dock, but he had one rule: no pooping on the dock. one by one, the ducks break the rule. So my daughter called me. I said, Mom, I'm really upset with you. I said, well, what did I do? And she said, well, the kids want that as a bedtime story, and I can't tell it the same way you do. And then they get all mad and upset. So I said, you have to write it down. So I wrote it down, and I said, well, I might as well publish it. And so that was my first step into publishing. So once again, I stepped away from the novel, right? But just the experience of going through self-publishing and just kind of learning the ropes a little bit, it all kind of fed into this 5-year journey. And then I had 3 best friends die of cancer that were really close to me. It was really hard to lose them. And one in particular, Kathy Graham Catterfield, I remember going to the hospital, and she had read the few drafts. She was in Brigham there in Boston when she passed. We held on to each other and cried. And I said, I'm going to finish this book for you, and I'm going to dedicate it to you, which I did, along with my 2 other friends that passed away. But then, I ended up in 2020 going to Arizona and hiking and being in all the beautiful country, right? So area in the canyons. So when I hiking, I just kind of like got inspired to write the rest of it. So I took all that stuff, and I think it just made the book richer and deeper and more real.
Hmm. It definitely sounds really real. It definitely sounds like a very authentic book. So now, folks, we'll talk about the story. Swear to God. Hand to God, we're doing this thing. My hands up, we're doing this thing. So Annie, Sandra, and Jo are the best of childhood friends, but they haven't seen each other in many, many years. They're reunited on an adventure that is a combination of humor, danger, and enlightenment. And each character kind of carries their own baggage, for lack of a better word. Annie is devoted to her kids and to volunteering, but she's got a secret. Sandra is married to a super rich guy in LA. She's got it all, but she at some point ends up way over her head. Jo is 4 years sober and struggling through a divorce, and after a one night stand, she's forced to kind of reckon with a lifetime of bad choices. And Annie's secret definitely seems to be kind of the center of this story. What role does the secret play in the overall story?
Well, one, it brings the 3 friends together. And I think it really hits a theme that is so hot with women today and men. Seriously, I think for a lot of people. And that's about self love. She's kind of ended up sacrificing so much of herself. She's the wife of a small town pastor. And I grew up in a small town, so I kind of get this. And I grew up, my dad was very, religious. So we could never miss church unless we were really, really sick. We tried at times. But her secret is such where the 2 friends have such compassion, because it's really hard to keep secrets in a small town. And so she's afraid of all the judgment that's going to be placed upon her. She's got a special role being the minister's wife. She feels like she has to be perfect. So these 2 friends are like, we got to save her, right? I mean, we're going to go there. We're going to save the day. We're going to tell her, get her to open up so we can give her the right kind of support. And in the end, I don't want to give away the story, but in the end, she has a very big role in helping to save them.
Hmm. What about creating the actual characters? Like, how'd you go about doing this? And as a follow up question, are any of them based on folks you know?
I've, as far as like you said, asking about natural characters, was that your question? Okay. I, gosh, I guess because I'm really down to earth, person. Um, and I think I grew up in a very non pretentious home and environment. And that's kind of who we are. And that's who my friends are, and the community that I prefer to be in. I mean, um, and that's one thing I do love about Amelia Island is when we were thinking about moving here, because we still live in the summer in Wisconsin, is I said, well, what's it like there? And people said, well, they're smart people. They love dogs, but they're very unpretentious. So we said, sounds good to me, right? Um, and then I would say, as far as the characters and who they're based on, I would say this, people like to say, are you the characters? And there, of course, there's a little bit of me in each character, because I have had the self love issues. I've had to let go of my past mistakes. I've had to learn forgiveness of myself and others, just like the characters have to. And I've messed up many a times, in my journey. But gotta like that's those big lessons. And then when you learn to overcome those things, and you just become more powerful and empowering. And I would say that all those characters too are parts of my friends. I would say many of my girlfriends are part of those, especially the laughter and the banter. And then I have three sisters. So when we get together, there's a lot of teasing and funny stuff. But of course, we're always there for each other. And then I've met a lot of women through my career and then teaching women in my workshop. So yeah,
Hmm,
combination.
I like it. I like it. What's the point of creating such flawed characters or such characters that have to face these internal struggles?
Well, I felt that, there's this passion inside of me. And I really wanted to write these characters. And so that in book clubs, I was hoping book clubs would, talk about it and talk about these issues of the characters' flaws, like, you know, being a martyr, learning how to embrace self love, learning to let go of past mistakes, forgiveness of self and whatnot. And I just felt that women don't have enough safe opportunities to do that. That there's like the stigma, right? If you say, I'm hurting or I'm lonely or, gosh, I'm not sure if I should have done that, or kind of beat yourself up over the past. And I feel like sometimes women feel very alone in that. And so I was hoping by this book, beyond it, I really wanted to make a fun, entertaining story. So there is a lot of fun in it. There's a lot of funny scenes. I promise you. Um, but there's these other meanings interwoven. So I thought, let's create some dialogue around this. So I'd love to see women talking about book clubs, one-on-ones. One of my goals is to, on even social media, to try to create different groups and virtual events where women can come on and we can talk about this and learn to empower each other by sharing our stories. And that, because I think it's the latest stat I read that 40%, over 40% of women globally are feeling lonely and isolated. And it's probably higher after the pandemic. So, and it's not like men aren't welcome. I just think the book is just geared more towards women in general. And though I do know some men, I've read it and have really enjoyed it. So
Hmm.
it's fun.
How do you write a book like this where it's going to be able to cater to both genders, men and women?
I didn't. I focused on humor, and an adventure. So there's a lot of action. In fact, one of my readers said, "Boy, once you get in the river, it just doesn't stop. Boom, 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 boom. Can you draw it out longer? Because I want to like read more of it." And I think, you know, I think men tend to probably like a little bit more action in their stories that they read. And there's no stereotyping there. Um, and so, I guess I didn't really worry about it. I thought if I could write a good story and write good characters and write good dialogue, have the right story arc and the character arcs, that, you know, the rest would take care of itself.
Do you worry about being able to write a story that everyone's going to like? Like when you're writing this book, do you think, okay, I got to make sure I write it this way so that, it gets like, good reviews and gets talked about in the blogs and the magazines and so forth?
I didn't. I didn't. I guess, I've been writing for a long time, in the six screenplays. And then even in work, I was, a communication specialist for a while. And then I taught workshops when I was in the corporate world as well. And, I've done so much writing. But my biggest goal was I wanted to make sure the dialogue was real, right? Short, punchy, real, the way people talk, So that to me was, I think, what I wanted to achieve most was to have the dialogue be, you know, catchy and the best it could be. And I think that's where I went back over the last 2 years, especially, and rework scenes to capture that kind of dialogue.
Hmm. Now, I think we mentioned this earlier, but obviously the outdoors plays a big role in this story. The three friends are on a canoeing trip that becomes this like death-defying adventure. They get lost in the woods, and the campfire, as the title implies, is where the action happens. Basically, this is where they have kind of the big sit down and sharing of secrets and just telling really what's going on. Um, I guess my question to you is why not set this in a city? Why not set this in, like anywhere else? How does the setting really help and shape the story?
One, I love nature. I'm a nature girl. Grew up on lake in the middle of the woods. First family to go to school on that side of the lake, all that kind of stuff. Um, but I also felt like there's not a lot of women books that are based in nature. And I feel that there is kind of this almost a spiritual connection when you get out in nature, and you also get to leave the worries behind, right? It's just like going for a walk outside. You escape the office, you escape looking at dirty dishes, you escape work, you escape, whatever. So, and then when you're get to like be outside and away from, I guess I would say, the real world in a sense, I guess the world of the city and our work and our worries and our troubles. Um, you start to open up. You start to kind of, your mind clears a little bit. You get into a different state. And if you've been lucky enough to sit around a campfire long enough and you look at the flames, you start to relax a little bit, right? And you start to become creative and start to kind of think about past. It helps for reflection. So I wanted that environment.
Hmm. Do you think it could have worked if you had tried it in a different environment?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. I think so. I think the challenge would have been to create as much action that happens in the river,
Yeah,
you know?
you really can do that on like on the streets of Boston. I mean, that can be pretty death defying. Let me tell you something like that,
Yeah.
folks. I've lived in Boston for 8 years. Walking those streets, you're taking life into your own hands, and actually, Philly's worse.
I have wiped out many times on some of the brick pavers and, some of those things and, yeah, dodging traffic or whatever, or taking the cab ride, the taxi ride that with the driver that wants to get, to the next stop as fast as he can or she can.
Ugh. No, thank you very much. No, thank you very much. All right, all right. We talked a lot about your background. Of course, it's quite a background. But how do you think this kind of influenced your just writing style or your love of writing?
Oh, I guess, just not being afraid to go back and rewrite a scene for one thing. I think because I've put enough work in front of people to know that it had to be, you know, good. Um, I think also wanting it to be relatable. So someone when they were looking at that reading the character, that they could relate to that character, even maybe feel like they're that character. There's a part of them that's in that character. So I think just by studying, just really human personal development, being in the field I was, and studying so much human potentiality, I like to call it, versus personal development sometimes. Like, and then of course there's the whole organizational development, working with the business side. I just think it just kind of gave me a broad expanse of, what people go through. Yeah, you see life and death in corporations in some ways too. I've done layoffs on one side, which is very painful, and I've done acquisitions where there's been a lot of joy, right? But that whole spectrum of, human experience, is part of what I bring to it.
Okay, I can see that. I can definitely see that. Now, where this is your debut novel, but not your first time writing, how was it when the time came to ship this off to the publisher? Do like someone have to like pry the manuscript out of your hands?
No, it's more like hallelujah.
Oh, really? Wow. Yeah. I find that it's usually one of those two things. Either it is, oh my god, what did I miss? Or thank God this is finally done.
Because I thought I was done editing. I had, professional editor, my coach that I was working with. But then when I, signed with BooksFluent, they had an editor go over it again. And then they always wanted me to sign off. So I would read it again. And by the fourth time that it came back, I'm like, I have to read this whole again, you know what
I
I mean,
know.
after all the rewrites before. And as much as I love the story, it's like I don't know if I can catch a small error anymore, because I read it so many times. Thank heavens I like the
I know,
story.
right? It's like, oh, again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it was with joy that it was like, okay, let's these babies are ready. It was like a 5-year pregnancy.
just
You
like,
know,
just like,
get it out of me.
just like, flinging it out the door, like, phew, get out of here. I don't want you to come back. Get the hell out.
That's right.
I'll bet. I'll bet. Um, how'd you release this? Because of course, things like book signings and expos and such, a lot of them still haven't come back yet, or they've only come back in a limited capacity. So, what was release day like for you?
Well, I ended up doing a virtual launch party, which was really fun, and put it on Facebook and invited all my, my friends that I have, and then in this community, there's a club that actually that has an enrichment program. So I was able to go in front of about 125 people. We drew in and put together a presentation. It was great. Kind of rocked the house with just talked a lot about kind of the journey from a log roller to an author. And then our local bookstore here, there's two bookstores here, the Book Loft, as well as Story and Song, and they're both extremely supportive of my book. The Book Loft worked with the first night, and then Story and Song worked with the second night at their store and had a wonderful turnout as well. And then the next day, there was this feeling like, okay, well, that was really great. Now what? But then, of course, there's interviews like with yourself, Max, which is awesome because your background is so. I studied your background and everything you've done, your journalism background and how you support artists and entertainers is fabulous. So that was really looking forward to tonight. And then I'm actually have been getting asked. I think I probably have 12 book clubs I'm going to be joining. I just had these women just love the presentation and have liked the book. So I'm hoping my dream's coming true that it is going to create this dialogue. So I've got 12 book club events and another presentation I'm going to be doing down in Bonita Springs, Florida, that a friend has sponsored me for. And just kind of going back to Wisconsin this summer, and I have a friend that's putting together a campfire, and he's inviting my whole hiking group to come, and we'll probably share stories around the campfire. And I'm kind of hoping to play in that theme and maybe just do some camp, fire sessions with friends. And I guess I'm just trying to see where it takes me. I want to really be creative with it, and I love if anybody has ideas that's listening to this on how you'd like to do a virtual campfire talk with me, or talk about some of these issues, talk about the book. And I mean, I'm just so open to ideas and suggestions, and having fun with it too, because I want it to be a fun journey, right? I want people to have fun too, you know.
That is so cool that you're getting the chance to share the story with so many people too. Because most folks, it's like, okay, a book signing or two, maybe a presentation, and then you call it. But you get all these things lined up, so I think that's really a good sign that the book is reaching people and also connecting with them too. Um, what would you say is, I guess, the goal or the message of this book? Is there one?
Yeah, I do feel there's one. I would say that there is such a power to friendship, and that find the right friends, and if you don't have that right friend, to start to work on those connections because we all need them. So somebody else there needs a connection too. And that when you learn to open up and share your vulnerabilities, then you allow that other person to open up and share their vulnerabilities as well. And then you just get to start to talk. Because I can't tell you how many times, I'm sure you might have experienced this. I have, is I was like, man, that really, threw me for a loop when this thing happened. And I felt really bad about it or sad. And that person was like, oh, I felt the same way too. I just didn't know what to do, and then suddenly we're talking about it, and that could be everything from recovering from a pain of a divorce, or maybe you are struggling with an issue with your child and you don't know how to talk about it, or maybe, you're struggling in a relationship with a significant other. It just can be so many things, or maybe it's a job issue, or just a personal growth issue.
Hmm.
So,
I want to ask a little more about the power of friendship because you hear that line a lot, and it ranges. Like you hear it a lot in like kids' cartoon shows, but also in more like serious stories. But I want to ask about your experience with the power of friendship, how it's kind of changed your life.
Yes, I mean, I don't know if I'd be here without my friends. I mean, like, I just feel I have three sisters who are definitely my best friends, as well as some other beautiful, beautiful friends. And, there was different points in my life where I was a single mom for a number of years, raising two daughters by myself, till I met my husband, who now her brush is like the love of my life. So I'm very lucky. It'll be 24 years in April. But there were some highs and lows, and the lows were, not easy. And I needed friends and I needed my people. So I'm one that I've learned just to reach out. It's almost like I have this Rolodex. I just like have my list of 10 to 15. If one's not home, I'll go to call the next one, the next one, the next one. Um, because it's so much easier, and I just helps me process. Um, because when I was a single mom, there were some years that I felt very alone, and I felt like I didn't have that good support system. And so I worked at it. I learned to network. I learned to become a better friend. I learned to reach out more. I learned to text or call and email. I mean, I have one friend that at least 3 or 4 times a week, her name is Melissa Frisvold, and we'll send each other a text in the morning and say, "What's your intention for the day?" It might be, "I want to feel love today," or "I want to feel creativity," and she'll share hers with me. And just those little things like that, and then I can call like saying, I had this thing happen and I really feel upset about it. I got a few minutes, and then it allows her then to do the same with me, right? So yeah, it's been vital to myself and my happiness, and my husband is too. Is probably my very best friend. So I'm lucky with that.
Hmm.
Got to give him a little shout out.
There you go. There you go. All right, Kristine. Well, the big question I think that folks are wondering is there another book in the works?
There is. I am a couple of things. And one was kind of a historical novel. And then I just thinking, man, I don't know if I've got it in me to do all that research into it properly. um, but to maybe do a little bit of a play on that. But also, I was considering taking like Nantucket Ore, which is a screenplay, and turning it into a novel, because it was that story touched a lot of people's hearts. And people who read that screenplay 15 years ago still remember it. So I thought, well, there's some magic in there. And yeah, but I'm also curious. I'd love to ask my readers of the book, what would they like to see next? And would they like to see these characters again, or a story like this? So I'm playing with ideas. I've got different paragraphs written here and there. So something will come. I mean, it's already coming.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, Kristine, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And for the folks at home, you go to KristineOchu.com, Kristine with a K, OCHU.com, and get your copy of Campfire Confessions. This is available through BooksFluent. It was released on March 8th, so it's just out right now. Get your copy, print, ebook, however you like it. You go to your local bookstore. If they don't have one on the shelf, you order it. You order a bunch of copies, fill those shelves. Just drive the engagement. Leave some reviews. Follow her on her socials. Leave a
Yeah.
comment because all that engagement it really helps. It really helps. And Kristine, definitely looking forward to our next conversation for your next book.
Thank you. Thank you, Max. You're the best.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. Picture this. You finished your first book and nailed it. The plot, the characters, all the twists and turns. This one's a winner, and all you need is the right cover. If you've got my art skills, this is the part where panic usually sets in. Enter the cover villain, hero to writers everywhere. Founded by noted author Remy Flagg, Cover Villain focuses on composite image covers for science fiction and fantasy writers. Give them the details, and they'll craft a cover using popular trends that everyone will want to see. But wait, you say, I've got ideas of my own. No problem, as Cover Villain loves a good collaboration. As they say, our goal is to put a little villain in every cover we make. Want to know more? Then head to covervillain.com and follow them on Facebook and Instagram.
Hey, this is singer-songwriter and mental health advocate Stephanie Mathias. Be sure to check out my single Hero Side, available on all platforms now, and listen to Citywide Blackout, your home for the best indie artists.
Okay, everyone, that brings this episode to a close. Big thanks to Kristine for joining me, and definitely get a copy of Campfire Confessions. I know you'll love it. You can follow the show on Facebook under Citywide Blackout, and Twitter and Instagram under Citywide Max. Get at me at citywidemax@yahoo.com, and check out the show wherever you find podcasts, as well as every Saturday at 10 p.m. on Boston Free Radio. As always, keep those ears open.